in this. All right, so is that giving you the full screen?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So more focus on this eco-commoning, down-to-earth way of life. So, I've tried to look at framing, and I've tried to look at this history in a snapshot kind of way to say that we don't have to take history as it is in the last 200 years. We can understand that from our cognitive perspective that we can change our concept and metaphors and language to take us to a new place. So how do we have opportunity out of these challenges? Lots of people are talking about where we're going to be. Are we going to go back to the status quo? Is that where we're headed? Or is this an opportunity to think differently and to use different images that can take us there? Can we reframe from our individualistic perspective to a relational understanding of the world and how we relate? Can we change from a capitalist to a eco-commoning perspective, the commons rather than driven by the selfishness of capitalism? From a global to a glocal, this is Jeremy Rifkin's term, glocal, which I like, global, local combined. It acknowledges our interconnectedness, but that local reality is good and can happen in small ways, and we can be different. We don't have to be the same in the global environment. We can move from authoritarian regimes to peer governance, kind of free press, and the opportunity to have peer governance that we attempt to model in our communities. We can move from a mechanistic worldview to a complex one of reciprocal causality. I love this image of how these two creatures appreciate each other and have benefit relationship in how they interrelate. Can we reframe Christianity from guy in the sky imagery to energetic presence? Can we use scientific language to describe the great mystery that we're all part of? Can we understand our deep history in new ways using both our traditional stories and our scientific insight? They don't have to be polar opposites. They can both be alive for us in our description of our interconnectedness. Here's some examples of commoning around the country and globally. This is out on Gabriel Island. Bill and I visited there in the fall, and folks on the island attempting through their commons to understand a new way of relating to each other, how hard that is as professionals coming in to figure out what a commons way of working is and working that through. And when we were there, people were crushing apples using the commons apple cider press and using the common benefits that they pooled together. They created this bus system called the Gertie bus system. They got a few grants from the government and bought these buses, and then they had volunteer drivers. So they created a transportation system around the islands down to the ferry docks that enabled common use. This is in Toronto. Joshua from Edge connected me with the St. Clarence Commons, young folks attempting to build a housing cooperative and working out the dynamics of living in common with each other. Here's some images from around Orillia, where I am. The community shared agriculture, the refillery district, getting away from packaging, the farmers market, St. Paul's, our sharing garden. All of these are examples of doing things in common with each other. And the whole digital commons that we're a part of. We see that transnational Google and Apple and so on one side of the conversation, but the other side, open source and sharing of information and technologies that people can make a decent living in a cooperative way. The Creative Commons as a way to license our material so it's recognized and used effectively. Here's an example of a commons technology company where I share resources and share the services of the internet. This is a tremendous example from the Netherlands. It's coming to Canada, a different way of doing healthcare. And most of our healthcare is delivered like an assembly line of one person going from person to person, delivering one form of service, an injection here, an injection there, an injection. Whereas this approach is a small collective of nurses and personal care workers work together, thinking holistically about the client and what they need around family and shopping and all those things. A very effective model. It's both good for the workers and the people. This is the example of where I work, St. Paul's Center, place of gathering. If I'd been on board with this language 5 years ago when I began there, I probably would have lobbied for us to be the St. Paul's Commons as a way to describe our connection, our use of this building, the transformation of it as a community resource rather than our church. This building is a community resource, and we have an art gallery that's led by Indigenous people. We have concerts there. We have the community kitchen where we use food bank food to teach healthy meal preparation, our inclusiveness. We've begun to conceive differently of how we do church and think about it. So taking our traditional language of what we do and using eco-commoning language, that humans, we need ritual, we need celebration. That's part of who we are. Pastoral care, how do we think of it rather than in this delivery model, caring for each other in community. Education, rather again, we're not educating others, we're in a learning process together. How do we think in that way of learning commons? Outreach, rather than using that language, think in terms of community engagement. How are we working to transform our local community? Hospitality and welcoming, how do we reinterpret that of us welcoming them to understanding our relationship with each other and creating a welcoming environment. So this is how I'm playing with it in my context and the language, so that we can imagine ways to think about eco-commoning in different and creative ways, how to use this language to reframe things. Bill, I think you were going to add something?
Commoning might look like is there are thousands of different configurations or ways of recovering the commons. And that's quite exciting. And Ted's just given us a little snapshot of some of the ones that he knows about. So that's very encouraging that they're all different models. My thing about is around the challenge of it is in all my ministry, in the 3 congregations I served as executive secretary of Alberta Northwest Conference, even as moderator, but in all my different roles within the church, my goal has always been to relate the church to the needs of its community and to form partnerships with community organizations and so on. So we have in our buildings many different kinds of groups, like Ted has described. And I've been parts of congregations that have had everything from daycares to bookstores to social justice groups to domestic violence groups to world development groups and all that kind of thing. So really having our churches become community centers in a way. And that's been exciting. That's been what I've tried to do all my ministry. But as I think about it in terms of moving ahead into what we're calling eco-commoning, it's still generally within the dominant culture, where we're doing service things. We're creating NGOs to give good service in the community and so on. But it's still within the dominant systems of politics, of economics, cultural systems, and social systems, and so on. So that we haven't got to the point, for example, of shared ownership of our properties, of shared governance. And I'm in some places I've tried to do that, and people really resist it because they've got their own thing that they're doing to give service, and they don't want to become part of sort of a shared enterprise, if you will, or a shared vision, except minimally. So I think that's the challenge. Many of our congregations and our people, our volunteers, our physical resources, our financial resources, our properties are moving some way to become part of the community. I think people understand that. But to me, there's a significant jump to becoming part of an eco-commons. The last thing I'll say is that I think everything we do has to be firmly rooted in Mother Earth, and rooted in our bioregion, whatever that is. And we have to, in everything, recognize we are one part of creation, and we are interdependent with all the other pieces of creation. And that's exciting to me, but it's really a challenge as to how we actually do that. So what I'm looking for is moving beyond what some of our congregations are already doing and being involved in the community and a good citizen, in the community. But how are we going to create a whole different way of being in a commons way? I guess that's it.
We have one question. Thanks, Bill and Ted. That was great. We have one question that came up from Selena of, does a commons have to have equal access, or can it be for specific groups? Just a really quick clarification there.
Well, part of the commons is the local group has to describe and embody the kind of values that you want to have. There can be differences between groups as they look at their region, as they look at their economic needs, as their social needs. So I don't want to be carte blanche about one way or the other, but the core values that we're trying to lift up need to be embodied in how people come and organize together in their collective, their small groupings. That's the ambition anyway. So
thank you. That's great.
So I guess we're moving into the third small group. So we've tried to give emphasis to where we work, our church, our community groups. What do you see as already part of an eco-commoning difference, the beginning of this transformation? And can you see some next steps for yourself in terms of taking us to a different future that's more relational and commons in our orientation? So let's discuss that.
Okay, I'm going to put you back into your rooms. We're going to come back at 12:08. If the scribes can do a copy so you can paste, or just put it onto a Word document and we'll worry about it later. I'm going to open the rooms, and if anybody is unassigned, just stay here and we'll get you assigned. Enjoy your conversation.